Hello everybody, thank you for joining this webinar on providing quality feedback brought to you by the Preparing Future faculty at Claremont Graduate University. I'm your host, Jonathan Aragon, PFF Fellow, and co-hosting with me today is Elizabeth Cardenas, also PFF Fellow, and we also have joining us today Shelby Lamar, the Assistant Director of Preparing Future Faculty. We're using, if you want the closed captions or the subtitles on so you can see everything I'm saying, it's enabled. You just have to go to the bottom of your screen and click on the closed caption setting and say show subtitles. And then after doing that, you can also adjust the subtitles by clicking on subtitle settings, and you can adjust the size of it. So I'll give you just a moment to do that, and let me know if you have any trouble with it. Go ahead and put it up in the chat, and then Elizabeth will help you with that. All right, our agenda for today will go as follows. We're going to explore why it is that we provide feedback to our undergraduate students to begin with, and then what we mean by quality feedback. What is that? The problem that we face as educators when providing quality feedback to our students, the solution, additional considerations, some technical tools that can help you with providing quality feedback to your undergraduate students, and we'll leave you with some resources that you can take with you into practice. So just to begin and get us all loosened up a little bit, I would like to hear from you. When you think about why we give feedback to our undergraduate students, what is your idea of that? Why do we do this to begin with? Go ahead and type your response in the chat below. And we'll discuss that. To keep them informed, Anna says. Cindy says to provide suggestions. Jordan says to guide learning. Yeah. To encourage them that they are understanding the teaching correctly. Yeah, very true, Janice. To make sure they are aware of their progress and the areas that still require work. Yeah, to keep it informed of the progress. To engage and motivate, Elizabeth says. Thank you for that feedback. It's really helpful to see what other teachers, what other educators think about this. Next time I do this webinar, I might steal some of these and use them. Here are the things I came up with when I was thinking about this. Why do we give feedback to begin with? To help students tap into their abilities. So, as educators, we're in the business of developing human beings. And that's very important because our students go on to make the world a better place. They go on to do that through scholarship, in developing communities, and in what they bring to their own families. So we want to help them tap into their abilities and grow when it comes to course content, but I really feel like it's more than just course content. We want to foster the disciplinary competencies, their capacities to do work, to move beyond being able to write 3 pages to 30 pages, to develop their professional identities, something that we do a lot here in preparing future faculty, to identify their strengths and interests, to help them identify their values, and to promote well-being, which is the state of being happy, healthy, and prosperous, because isn't that what we all want for our students? We also provide feedback to model feedback for them, because by the way we give feedback models for our students how they receive feedback and how they themselves will go on to give feedback to others. And feedback happens in so many places. It will happen throughout your entire college career, but it also happens in relationships, in the workplace, and pretty much threaded everywhere in our social society. All that said, feedback is essentially a part of good teaching. Without feedback, what really is the point of taking a class? Why not just self-study if you're not going to get those points of feedback? That brings us to what is quality feedback, because that's the topic of our webinar here today. Not just providing feedback, but providing quality feedback. So just feedback by itself is simply a teacher's response to a student's work in the context of the classroom. But none of us are coming to the webinar here today to learn how to give a check mark. We're interested in how do we provide quality feedback. And for me, I condensed quality feedback into these two things. Quality feedback is timely and it's meaningful. And both these things are important. It's grounded in high expectations and high involvement in your students' engagement and success. It needs to be timely. That's very important, because the most impact your feedback will have is when students are really fresh in their process, when they're still in that creative space, when they've put their efforts and work into something. You can provide timely feedback and they can improve. If it comes like a week later, then it's less impactful than it comes very quickly. And then meaningful, it needs to be meaningful because that's what motivates us to apply the feedback, to be engaged in learning and growing as a human being. Essentially, though, the problem with providing quality feedback is it's very time consuming. So I've done this, I'm sure we've all done this. Those of us that really care a lot about our students, we can spend a lot of time. If you have an essay, for instance, you can spend a lot of time tearing it down, breaking it down, listing all the things that you might want to address, deciding what things you want to address, and then by the end of it, you've spent almost as much time writing as your student has. And if you have a big class, that's a lot of work. So, but students really appreciate it. It helps them a lot. The problem with this is if you have to spend a lot of time providing quality feedback, then it limits the data points, the times in which you can interact with your students and provide feedback to them. So the more frequent points of feedback you can give, the better. But spending a lot of time providing feedback restricts you from being able to provide feedback more often. And as I said on the last slide, it may not come at the most impactful moments if you have to spend a lot of time giving quality feedback. Timely feedback, on the other hand, is great. You can get a lot of feedback out quickly, but sometimes when we do this, we sacrifice timeliness for quality. So it could be something like good job, where it doesn't really provide any useful direction for students if we're trying to get it out just to get it out. Or it can provide direction but consist of blur words, vague direction. Be less vague. I originally had on here like be more precise, but then Shamane Diaz, who has joined us, she's the director of Preparing Future Faculty. She notified me of something she witnessed where a teacher's comment was, be less vague on a student's essay or something like that. And I thought that was ironic, so I had to put it in here. So this is important, right? It's like providing feedback because you have high expectations for your students versus providing feedback for your students because you want to give them a comment so they have feedback on their paper, right? So what's the solution to this? The solution is to be more targeted. So you want to provide feedback more quickly, and where that helps you is to provide targeted responses. So what I mean by that is you don't really have to address everything in your students' work. Just pick one thing to address and address it well. So if it's grammar, focus on grammar. If it's a first draft of something and you want to help them develop their ideas, focus on helping them develop their ideas. Pick one thing to focus on it, and then get it back quickly. And along with that targeted response, good feedback, quality feedback provides opportunities for that feedback to be applied. So with whatever work it is that you're giving to your students, you want to make sure that you're providing opportunities for them to apply that feedback. For example, giving them multiple drafts, multiple attempts of doing the work, scaffolding it, so to speak. And if you're asking your students to do something that doesn't give them those opportunities, then you might want to ask yourself if it's worth giving in the class at all. Because sometimes less is more. And then having targeted corrections. So as you're giving your students very targeted responses, you're also giving them targeted corrections. So I used to do this where I would write down many notes, write down many things, and then select, okay, what things do I feel like they can work on right now? But this targeted response focus sort of declutters that from your brain as well and saves your time in grading because your response is targeted, so the corrections that you're going to engage in are also going to be targeted. So an example of this might be you have one thing you want to focus in on, but you're going to see the positive in it. You're going to recognize what has been done well and acknowledge it. You're going to recognize things that you notice from the relationships that you're built with your students, the strengths that they have, maybe something you can say about how to foster their strengths and interests and how they can apply that into future work or required course content that they're interested in, and really make that make those comments very meaningful, but also targeted. Another approach you can use to get more feedback out more frequently and more quality is by utilizing micro-conferences. So not all your feedback has to be in writing. It doesn't always have to be red ink on something, even if it's digital, right? Micro-conferencing is where you just have some very quick face-to-face time with your students to talk about the work. And that actually is a lot of times more meaningful than just receiving something in writing, because it's building those positive relationships between you and class, and between those who are in your class, and that builds trust. So the more trust that is built, the more that the feedback will be applied and put to use. An example of a micro conference that we've done in PFF, we have these teaching demonstrations that we need to do, and so in preparing for those teaching demonstrations, one of the things we did is we had students submit their lesson plans to us, and then we would look at those lesson plans, take some notes, and then we would all meet as a class together and go off into different breakout rooms and have students pair up and talk to each other about their work. And then the instructor will visit those breakout rooms, and then we will have a little micro conference to discuss their lesson plans and give them some quality feedback that they can take with them to apply it. This can also be done by utilizing peers and the instructor by, say, having students pick, say, one page from their paper, and then you're going to focus on one thing on that one page, which is, say, like commas or paraphrasing. And then you will have peers read it and provide corrections, provide a rubric, give them a chance to rate themselves, and then meet with them and have like a 1-minute conference where you can provide them some feedback after they've done that work themselves. So the responsibility is shared. The student is engaging in that reflective thought about their work, and then you're engaging with them to give them your recommendations, suggestions, and doing these wise interventions, which brings me to the next point. So wise interventions. Wise interventions is really getting students to apply the feedback that you have given to them through positivity. So this is where you are helping them identify their strengths. Like, this is something we do a lot of PFF because we're in the business of academic professional development. So when we have our little interventions with students, it's usually to help them develop their professional identities, to recognize their values, their strengths, what they want to do, what institutions they want to work for, helping them develop their teaching philosophies, these sorts of things. In other settings, it might be addressing a mindset. So if your student has a fixed mindset, then your intervention will just be focused on helping them develop a growth mindset. I'm not good at math. You're good at anything you apply yourself to. So intervening in those kinds of mindsets where you detect that there's certain blockages to learning, intervening in those. And then any encouraging or authentic insights you can come up with. So that's really just recognizing your students as you get to know them, where their strengths are, what their interests are. Make sure that you say something encouraging. And it's very important that this is authentic as well, because by authentic, I mean saying what you mean, right? Like, oh yeah, that's really cool. Well, if you don't think it's cool, don't say it, right? So search within yourself for what you really think about their work, that what you really notice in them that needs to be fostered and lifted up, and focusing on that. And that's also just a point on well-being, right? You want to give your students a sense of accomplishment so that they are encouraged to move forward, and you also want to give them good positive feelings about their self and their abilities, because that's what helps them press on through the hard and challenging times. And these assignments sometimes can be very stressful, and when we're under a lot of stress, sometimes we want to give up. So that's really where you bring well-being into the picture. How you frame this, really starting with a positive, moving into corrections, and ending on a positive is a good way to approach any kind of feedback we give. All right. So that said, that's the general three-tiered approach to providing more feedback more quickly, but still having it be quality. But I really feel the need to add these additional considerations. Whenever giving feedback, it should always come from a place of shared interest. So that is not top down, I'm telling you that you need to do this or there's going to be consequences, right? It should not be punitive. It should come from a place of shared interest. We are working on this together to develop something in you, to produce the product that you're working on, whatever that might be. The feedback should always be specific. So, not just, what was the example I gave? Oh, too vague, right? They're just, if it's too vague, if your feedback is too vague, be specific. Where in the essay is it vague? Tell them where and tell them what to do so they can correct it. It should also provide actionable direction. I just addressed that. It should highlight personal assets. I've covered that many times. If they're really good at something, make sure you say it, right? Somebody might struggle with deadlines, but they produce a lot of quality when they do get things in. So be sure to recognize that. Tell them that they have a real talent for whatever talent it is that you recognize, and recognize it, because that's just part of human motivation. We want to feel like we're using our strengths, or we always feel like we're missing something. So make sure that you acknowledge their strengths when they use them, so they feel encouraged. You should always highlight what went well. Begin with that, as I said, and authentic. Say what you believe. So that's basically the providing the quality feedback itself. But I would be remiss if I didn't also mention how design matters. Because let's say that you're teaching a very large class. You're thinking, how can I do this with a very large class? How can I do this when I have 20, 30 students? Still, even applying these principles, it would be very time consuming. And so that's a design factor. It's a feedback factor, but it's also a design factor. So before the feedback even comes, you have to think about how you're designing your course. If you have a really large class and you have a lot of assignments and a lot of heavy assignments, you're really setting yourself up for burnout, because you have to grade all of those assignments that you've given. So think about that. It's okay to have less. Less is more. It's so much better to have fewer assignments that you can have multiple drafts of than it is to try to do a lot in your class, because then you are putting yourself in a position where feedback can be given consistently and all through the process, so that you can help your students succeed, right? There should be no reason that anyone should struggle in your class if you're providing a lot of scaffolding. And things still happen, but set yourself up for success, especially if you're teaching a very large class. And then if you are teaching a large class, utilize the other students, utilize the peers. All right, what did I write here? So so design considerations, just a heads up, your course outcomes should be more than just the course content, all the things we said before. well-being, competencies, capacities, identities, interests, and values should be in there as well. And your assignments should be directly attached to your course outcomes. Your assignments should be scaffolded with formative feedback all the way through to the final draft. Your class activities should be directly tied to your course assignments. And this is really important when it comes to your feedback being applied and used. Because in order for us to really care about something, then we have to feel that it's meaningful. And so if you have me working on something, but I cannot clearly see why I'm doing it, then even if you provide me quality feedback, I don't have a lot of incentive to care about applying it. But if the assignment you're given is required and you're providing feedback on something that's required, if the activities you're doing in class is clearly attached to an assignment that you have assigned in class, then there's going to be more involvement and engagement in it, and they have a lot more invested in applying the feedback that you give. In terms of caring about it and engagement as well, just a few other considerations here. The broader audience, the better. So where is the work being seen? Is it just being seen by you and your instructor, or are other students in your class seeing it too? Is it going to be public facing at some point? Is this something you're preparing for publication? Is this a performance that will be done in front of strangers? Is this going to end up as a video or a podcast or something? The larger the audience, the more your students are going to be invested in it, and the more reason they have to use the feedback you give them, to care about it. In preparing future faculty, we have this because we're developing these portfolios, the teaching philosophy statement, diversity statement, sample syllabus, all of this, that's being taken with our students onto the job market. They're submitting this to people to be looked at. So there's a lot of incentive to care about the assignment and to care about the feedback. And those things come together and they provide meaning. The more sources of feedback, the better. So again, just like your audience, the audience from which you're receiving feedback, the more of it, the better. So if it's coming from your teacher, great. That's some great direction. But if you can get it from all of your peers as well, even better. And any way you can innovate safely inputs from other sources, the better. All right. So tools. So all that said, let's talk about some tools that you can use to provide quality feedback to your students that isn't so burdensome on you as the instructor. So we have Canvas tools, such as the SpeedGrader function, and it also provides the ability to use audio files, video, and you can utilize group pages for your students to work together in providing feedback to each other on something. If you use the combination, this is something we do a lot in PFF, is using this combination of Zoom and Google Slides. And you can use big breakout rooms for the mini conferences to where you set up slides for every breakout room that has a color assigned to that breakout room. They can work on an assignment together. They can provide comments on the other group slides, and then you can reconvene in the main room to discuss it. So that's a really great way of getting multiple levels of feedback done in a very short time. And if you can make that your class activity, great. And if that's attached to an actual assignment that they're required to do, even better. Another tool that you can use is Floop. Hope I said it right. Floop. It's basically a hotspot tool. So you can create comments on your students' work that are hot spotted in specific points. And this is really good, I think, for math. So a lot of examples I gave today were like with essays, but this is good for math because you can go to a formula that a student has submitted and put a hotspot right on the X, wherever it needs to be, and provide a comment. You can also open it up so other students in the class can comment on the student's math homework, and it's anonymous, so you don't know where the comments are coming from if you want that feature enabled. And so now I will just show you some screenshots of those tools so you can sort of see what they look like. This is Floop, and as you see it being used here, see we have the hotspot on the X. And where's the next one? Yeah, and then you just see you basically write a comment, and then you drag and drop it where on the formula you want it to be, and then the student has that comment. This is SpeedGrader in Canvas, and so it looks kind of blank, but essentially this area here, let me shrink this so I can see if you can see my cursor. Yeah, you can see it. Okay, yeah, so this area here is where the student would submit their work. And then on the right over here, you would have a place to which you can provide comments on their work. And then you would assign a grade up here. Now, what's nice about this is you also have these tools here. And so you have an audio tool, a video tool, and this you can add an attachment if you would like to download it and write up a bunch of comments on their paper and attach that as well. You can do that. So like I said, you don't always have to do everything in writing. If you want to get feedback very quick, you can hit the record here and you can leave them some audio feedback and they'll get it. You can also record a video. You can grab your phone, you can record a video providing some feedback, and you can upload it here as well. And any combination of those. I want to pull you back up over here so I can see you all. All right. Okay. And most of us are probably familiar with this by now, but if not, this is the breakout room tool within Zoom. So you can assign participants into different levels of the group. So you can create 2 groups, assign 3 participants each, and you can make it automatically generate, so just randomly grouping people together, or manually grouping people together. And there's also a place in Canvas where you can create a page for groups. So if you want to build a cohort, you can assign students to be in groups throughout the whole course. And then every time you use breakout rooms in Zoom, you can put them in the same groups together. And that's another way you can build micro communities within your class. And this is Google Slides. So this is what I was talking about in terms of combining Zoom with the colored slides to work on activities together and comment on feedback for each other. So you see one here is blue, one here is purple, and one here is green. So you would just tell them when you go into the group, like pick a color, and that's your group, right? And whoever's work, or you can just send them into chat. You can broadcast a message in Zoom up top that will say, blue is group this, purple is group this, and so forth. All right, how are we doing on time? All right, so at this point, it's 1:38. So what I would like to do is give you a quick poll just so we can get some feedback on the webinar today and see how useful it is. If we want to do something like this again, or maybe aim in a different direction, we rely on feedback from you for that. And then we'll have a discussion and answer any questions that you have. So go ahead and fill that out, and I'll be right back with you. All right, it seems that everybody's about done. All right. So just a heads up, our next webinar that's coming up is Writing the Diversity Statement 101, Fundamentals of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And that will be hosted by none other than our co-host today, Elizabeth Cardenas, PFF Fellow. And I will be co-hosting that, so we're going to switch roles for that one. And so be sure that you register for it. Oh, does that let me click? Oh, yeah, because it's me. Okay. And then we have all these wonderful resources for you. So I put everything up, the resources for this webinar at this webpage, so you can go there, and then all the links to the resources are there. So be sure to check that out. If you go to this link, Preparing Future Faculty Events, you'll see all the webinars that we have scheduled for this semester. If you want help with anything we talked about, say using the tools that I went over, thanks, Carlos, then make an appointment with us and we'll be glad to help you. This Linktree link has all the links to PFF's social media and our website and everything else you might need to find regarding us. So use that link to find all the other links. And email us at pff@cgu.edu. All right. So now I will Just open it up for questions, comments, discussions, confessions, celebrations, any of those sort of things.